Okay, next up in Discovery and Exploration, looking at the study sheet. By the way, you need to run copies of the class notes worksheet, as I call it, for Unit I. That's the outline I'm following in my lectures here. That's the outline. It's annotated in the supplements, and the supplements will be the basis for the exams. So it wouldn't hurt to you to have that in front of you just as I have it in front of me. So question 6 on there. For the first quarter of a century after discovery, how did Spain view the newly discovered lands? Figure out fairly soon this is newly discovered. This is not the old world. Basically, they saw them as an obstacle. They still want to fulfill Columbus's dream. They want to reach the east by sailing west. Because Portugal is reaping a harvest, but after the treaty they made with Spain, Spain can't go around Africa to get to the east. They got to find some other way. So they're looking for some other way. So they're just looking for some way over, under, around, or through whatever this place is that they hadn't known about to get to the east. And I have to remind you of something. You could look at a map of the world or a map of the Western Hemisphere and instantly perceive more geographical information than was available to anybody anywhere until the 19th century. And details not even until after that. So it's not like Columbus comes back from his first voyage and suddenly they know all this stuff. They don't. They know there's some islands. That's it. It remains to be figured out how far north it goes, how far south it goes, how far across it is, what manner of men or beasts might dwell there. So, and the Spanish are suddenly not the only ones taking an interest. The English have an interest. The French have an interest. Spain got there first. There are conflicting claims. But it comes to light very gradually. Picture, if you will, a reality TV show, which is kind of a contest or a race, and there's this enormous room, and it's completely dark in the room. And in the middle of the room, there's this enormous, irregularly shaped object, and nobody can see it, but they know it's there. And the contestants each have little bitty flashlights, and they're all trying to be first to get from one corner of the room to the other. Now, what you discover, you're not going to share with your competitors, are you? So it'll be a while before information brought to light by people working for one country is generally available in the others. So it's going to be a slow process. A couple of things that matter. There are a lot of them. I'm just going to call attention to 2 or 3. In the year, I believe it was 1513, a Spanish explorer named Balboa got lucky and picked the narrowest point in the entire range of the Americas, which is now known as Panama. Landed there, made friends with the local Indians who helped him walk across the isthmus, and he may have been the first European to see the Pacific Ocean from the east side. There was a time I think they were saying he discovered the Pacific Ocean. Let's not do that. It's planet Earth's largest geographical feature. Its shores and islands are populated by millions of people, millions upon millions. How does it not exist until European eyes behold it? You see the problem. Same year, a Spanish nobleman named I'm slipping for a second. I'm going to pause this till I think of it. I can't pause it, can I? Discovered Florida. It's in the supplement. I've never slipped on that one before. I must be getting old. Nah, it can be. Ponce de Leon. That's his name. If he had a first name, it's his last name. Ponce de Leon. He's a Castilian, so it's probably Ponce de Leon. There was a king of Castile who lisped, and if the king lisps, everybody else does too. Well, he discovered and named Florida and may have thought it was an island. This is really the first serious exploration in what is now the continental United States. There is a legend that he was hoping to find the Fountain of Youth. where you drink it and live forever. So far as we know, he did not find it. That has not discouraged subsequent generations of elderly people from continuing the search in the same location. The average age of the population of the state of Florida is higher than any other state because everybody on the East Coast that has any money, they retire and they move to Florida. Maybe they'll find the fountain of youth one of these days. Okay. Mouth of the Mississippi, there are various people credited with discovering that. There was an exploration around the Gulf Coast in the late 1520s, the Pineda expedition. And we'll come back to that. There's something else I need to put in first. In 1519 and beyond, there are two explorations that are linked only by time. They took place in the same time frame. There was no other linkage. The first linkage, easy for you to say. The first was a voyage that ended up going all the way around the world for surely the first time. 1519, something like 4, maybe 5 ships with several hundred sailors aboard left Spain and sailed almost due south. They picked up the eastern tip of what's now Brazil and followed the coast of what's now South America all the way down. What their job is to see just how far south this thing goes, because you need to find that out to know whether it's practical to reach the east by sailing southwest. Okay, that makes sense. They finally got to the southern tip of South America where there's a very stormy, perpetually stormy passageway, still known as the Strait of Balboa. The crew of one of the ships just says, rain on this, and headed back home, leaving the fleet diminished by one ship. But the others successfully navigated through the passageway up the west coast of South America a little ways, and then they turned west and hooked them out across the South Pacific Ocean. That's the big empty. There's nothing out there but water for a long, long way. They had to survive by trying to catch rainwater. Maybe a big old albatross or something would accommodatingly land on the ship, make it break its neck and eat it, catch some fish. But by the time they finally found an island, they had eaten everything on the ships except each other. They're down to boiling their boots and belts to try to get some nourishment. But they discovered the island of Guam, claimed it in the name of the King of Spain, and were able to resupply themselves there by whatever they could find. Now, by the way, you look at a map, the southern Pacific is just spangled with islands, lots of islands. What you should know is those islands are drawn much larger than scale on a map, because if they were drawn to scale, you would need a microscope to see them. So you could sail through the whole place and not see an island, even though there's a lot of them out there. Okay, thus refreshed, they sailed further west and discovered an archipelago. That's a group of islands, claimed it in the name of the King of Spain, and who by that time is King Philip, and the islands are still the Philippine Islands, just off Southeast Asia. Spain and Portugal ended up adjusting their treaty, where Spain got to keep the Philippines. Portugal got a free hand to extend its claim in what's now Brazil further into South America. Now, the only violence happened in the Philippine Islands, where there was a skirmish with the locals, and did I say Balboa? Magellan, Ferdinand Magellan. I'll put that on the screen. Ferdinand Magellan is I didn't even tell you. Ferdinand Magellan. Magellan discovered through personal experience that poison arrows really will kill you. So under new command, they sailed southwestward from there. I think they ended up abandoning one of the remaining ships because there weren't enough crewmen left to sail that many. They made their way across the Indian Ocean, picked up the southern tip of South America, up the west coast of South America, and in 1522, almost exactly 3 years since they left, one ship with 19 men on it made it back to the islands from which they had departed 3 years earlier. Other survivors straggled in later, so the total number of survivors is between 50 and 60. Well, when they first got back, there was a kind of a dispute or a disagreement, which sounds like something out of a Star Trek episode. This really happened. It seems that it was not the same day for the men on the ship as it was for the people on the island. They're one day off. The people on the island claim one thing, the men on the ship claim another. Well, that can't be. The people on the island could document every day that had passed since the ships left. They had slept in and missed one. Same for the ships. They could produce their logbooks. So what's up with this? What is up with this? Think about it. They've sailed around the world in a westerly direction, and you know what time zones are? There are 4 time zones in continental United States. If you're driving east on I-20 across the Florida Panhandle, you're going to come to a sign that advises you you're entering the Eastern time zone, and what you're going to do is set your clock ahead an hour to compensate for that. Now, how many time zones on the planet? And I ask people this, and look at me. Well, how about 24? That's a question. Yeah, that makes sense. 24 hours a day, more or less. Anyway, there's one of these time zone boundaries that's special. It's known as the International Date Line. It's in the far western Pacific. It zigzags down from the North Pole to the south, trying to avoid any populated areas. And when you cross that line, depending on whether you're going west or east, you not only change the hour of the day, you change the date. Magellan's men did not know to do that. So that accounted for the discrepancy. It proved that planet Earth is round, in case there are any doubters, and I guess it didn't prove it completely because we got doubters left today, seriously. And it proved it's way bigger than Columbus thought it was. It proved that reaching the Far East from Europe by a westerly route is not practical. It's just not. It's too far because South America is in the way. You have to sail almost halfway around the world just before you can really start in a westerly direction. And then you're looking at the South Pacific. So Spain kept the Philippines for almost 400 years. The way they kept in touch is that once a year, a fleet of about 3 or 4, maybe 5 really big ships designed for that voyage would make their way eastward from the Philippines to Peru, exchange cargoes, letters, passengers, and then make the 6-month trip back. 6 months one way, 6 months the other, and that was it. Spain gave up possession of the Philippines to the United States in 1899 after the Spanish-American War, and the United States liberated the Philippines in 1946, having had to reconquer them from the Japanese in World War II. So that's one thing that caused the Spanish to redivert their attention. My question I'm answering is, what discoveries caused the Spanish to give their main attention to America as opposed to the Indies? Okay. The other was very different. That was a military expedition led by a man named Hernan Cortes. Cortes was like a lot of the guys out there. He was a younger son, hence not going to inherit anything, from a noble family, and he was given a command of a military expedition, around 700 men. Their job is to sail across from the western tip of Cuba to what's now the Yucatan Peninsula. That's not all that far, and then just see what's out there. Okay? Some details I'm leaving out. Suffice it to say, he makes it to Central America, discovers various Indian tribes, did not treat them very well, I'm afraid, and he and his men encountered the civilization ruled over by the Aztecs. It's now south central Mexico. They made it as far as Tenochtitlan, and long story short, after a few years, the Spanish, initially led by Cortes, displaced the Aztecs and put themselves in charge. This had been done any number of times before by various new tribes that would come in. So then they set about Hispanicizing and Catholicizing the local Indians. This event marks the beginning of the history of Mexico in the same way that English colonization marks the history of the U.S. I'll check you back in part 4.